Welcome and thank you for being here. We're excited to see everyone both in person and virtually. Today's MidStack Forum is being put on by the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee and hosted by the Minnesota DNR, so thank you for having us, DNR. My name is Shane DeGroy. I'm the City Forester with Maple Grove, and I'm also a member of the MidStack Education and Forum Subcommittee, and I'll be the monitor and host for today's forum. Today we have Steve Holsgrafey and Shingo Matthew with the Minnesota Bonsai Society. The Bonsai Society is a volunteer organization founded to create participation and appreciation in bonsai, which is a Japanese art form using trees grown in containers. You'll learn the history of the group, some bonsai basics, and maybe how you can practice the art of bonsai yourself. If you have any questions, please write them down in the chat, and we'll have a Q&A session at the midpoint and then again at the end of the presentation. For those joining us online, add your questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the talk as well. And without further ado, I'll hand it off to Steve.
Thank you, Shane, and thanks to everybody for hosting us. As Shane mentioned, we are a pretty informal group. I will be talking first. I have 16 slides, so not a lot of PowerPoint to drown you out with. I'll be talking about the history of the group, the offering of the group, what a typical year looks like for us, and then we'll actually turn it over to Shingo, who has most graciously, during the absolute worst time of year, actually brought his trees out and has a display for us, and he'll talk you through and take you through that. So without any further ado, some of the basics. We've been around for a while. Most people don't realize that we are over 50 years old. I as the treasurer CFO, still have the original paperwork from way back when. It's interesting to go back and look at that. We are incorporated as a 501c4 nonprofit, and that was done in 1985. We have over 350 members, so good community support. We have memberships as far away as Denver. We just recently had a new member from Minot, North Dakota. We have one or two people out on the East Coast for reasons unknown. But we're happy to take their money. And we'll get into a little bit about what a membership at currently at $50 a year buys you. Shingo and I are one of 13 board members, and we are currently full for the first time in my tenure. And so we have a full board. And that 13-member board runs the entire organization. We're entirely volunteer-based organization, and so everybody's time is donated. Our operations are wholly self-funded, meaning that every year we make enough money to fully fund whatever programming or outreach we want to do. We don't rely on any tax dollars. We don't write any grants, so we don't have to follow up every year and talk about what we did with the grant money. And so that allows us a bit of freedom. We're flexible. We're small and nimble enough to do what we want every year. But I will put the pitch in that we can't accept your donations, and so we're always willing to do that. So the Minnesota Bonsai Society, we are currently going through a reorganization. Is that I mentioned that we are a 501c4, and people are like, oh, you're a 501c3? No, we're a 501c4. We are doing the paperwork necessary to become a 501c3. There are benefits to doing that versus a C4, which I won't get into. But in doing so, we're looking at mission statements, what we actually do, where our money goes. And so our sort of new mission statement is that the promotion and delivery of bonsai education, outreach, and programming for all skill levels from novice to expert. And so we provide education, we perform outreach, and we produce programming. And as you saw on the title slide, Shingo is our new VP of programming, and he is attacking that position with gusto. And so you have some of the key players, and Shingo and myself, behind some of these tenets, some of these tent poles that we stake our organization on. So we'll go through a little bit about our educational programs, what we do for outreach, and what we do for programming. Then we'll talk a little bit, in the discussions before the presentation is like, people do 7-year apprenticeships in Japan still to this day to learn this practice and art and craft. And so in the course of an hour, we're just going to be able to skim the very top of it. We're going to peel back maybe half a layer of the onion, but we just want to give you a taste of what we actually do in the club. So bonsai education. And to set the stage, it is pronounced bonsai, not bonsai. And so you'll know immediately if you're talking with someone, you can judge, oh, do they know or do they not know? It's pronounced, and you can think of it as B-O-N-E phonetically, and then S-I-G-H, bonsai. I may slip and not pronounce it correctly, but that is the actual proper pronunciation. And I'll put Shingo on the spot for just a little bit before his presentation. Is Shingo spent 7 years?
Yeah, six
to 7 years actually in Japan, and you are fluent and fluent in Japanese. And so he is one of the best resources to have here, and we're glad he was showing up today. So where is our large end of the funnel? That's in our public education, is that we provide public education open to anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about the art. Some people just want an experiential half day. I want to come away with a tree. I want to style it. I want to repot it. Some people like, well, maybe this is a good way to dip my toes into a new pastime, a new hobby, a new pursuit. So we offer 3 weekends over the course of a year, spring, summer, and fall. They are on Saturday and Sunday. We have a Saturday AM, Saturday PM, Sunday AM. For $95, and you can either choose to work on a juniper or a particular species of fig. It all depends on when in the year you want to take the class, but you will come away with a potted bonsai, and you can style it to your heart's content. Repotting, we'll talk a little bit about that, and styling, how that affects the health of the tree. We also offer a free future checkup a couple months into the future, like, hey, how's your tree doing? Is it healthy? Is it thriving? Is it doing what you want? And so we want to not just be a one and done, but we always want to be able to circle back and help folks that are new to the journey. I will mention every one of the slides, the background is a picture of MBS's member's tree. And so this particular tree I chose for this particular slide because this is a juniper that was taken by a member, or a class taken by a member, and this is what a tree may look like when you're done with the workshop. And so you can see the juniper, you can see some deadwood, a deadwood feature, it's called a gin. You can see a little bit of a cascade, see what type of pot, but this is actually a member's tree from probably about 2 years ago now. So this is a typical example of what you would come away with after one of our weekend classes. So then we move into the education that is internal, I would say. What do you get for your $50? What opportunities are available for education on an ongoing basis with a membership? We have monthly concept workshops that meet out at Washington County on a Saturday from, I believe, 12 to 4, something like that, are entirely free. And so they'll talk about topical subjects, pruning, pest control, preparation for state fair, just whatever is germane to that particular month of the year. And that's entirely free. That's maybe a half-hour talk. And then people actually bring their trees to work on and get peer support. We have volunteer members that will come in that have been with the group for 10, 15, 20 years, and be able to ask questions, be able to circulate, and be able to help you work on your trees. We have member-led mentorship groups, and so these are smaller groups. You can see we have 350 members. We can all meet at the same place at the same time, but we have smaller mentorship groups that will possibly meet, possibly discuss things by email. And then we also have a private Facebook group where people can ask questions. Hey, I got this tree, it's not doing so well. Recently, I remember there was some guys like, hey, my tree is not doing well at all. And the suggestion was, well, shake it. Do any mites fall out? Well, you have spider mites, and you better start with a miticide. And so it's a good way, again, to tap into the network where we're not necessarily all together and meeting face to face. The next few bullet points are where we bring in visiting professionals. And so we're very, I don't know if I'd say aggressive, but we are very cognizant of the fact that Minnesota is a tough place to do bonsai. Our growing season is spectacularly short compared to the West Coast, which is where a lot of the bonsai in America is, or perhaps along the Gulf Coast. But at the same time, we want to be able to provide opportunities to people who want to maybe take their skills and their trees to the next level. So we have, one of our things we offer is a multi-year cohort where we bring in a visiting professional 4 times over 2 years to work on bigger, higher valued, older trees. And Julian Tsai was the leader for this past cohort, which just got over in November. So we're always bringing in, and you can find these people on our website. I did have some URLs, but these are people who are practitioners who have spent 7 years in Japan, who are known worldwide for their art and for their craft. And we feel lucky that we're able to convince them to come to Minnesota to apply their craft. And I think they're a little surprised when they get here about how strong the organization is and how strong the interest is in doing this. We also have a yearly topical workshop. For the past 2 years, it has been carving, where we'll actually get out the Dremels and carve deadwood for conifer trees. And so there's a gentleman, Drew Binkley, I think he's in Tennessee, that has come up for the past couple of years, and we'll get out either the knife or Dremel and actually go in, and you'll spend the day carving on a tree, which is not something you necessarily hear about bonsai. This year, we're very excited. Young Cho is leading a Kusamono workshop, and she is known worldwide. And this is actually a example of another board member's, Eric's Kusamono display. So this is actually not a tree, but like it's plants that again would accompany a bonsai display. And Young, I believe, has done work at the national, I believe she's out of Washington, D.C., and has done work at the National Bonsai exhibition in D.C. People 2 years ago took a workshop from her in St. Louis in September of 2024, I believe, and just came back raving. And so we've worked for 2 years to try and get her to come, and she's putting on a workshop this summer for MBS. Also, the last visiting professional that we have come is over our state fair period, where we'll have Matt Reel, who's been here before, but not for a while. He is another one who spent apprenticeship in Japan. And over the state fair, it's a little bit different because that is a judged display and exhibition, is that there's actually a critique by a visiting professional and awards given by this professional. So he'll come for the better part of a week, do the state fair. We'll actually put on a workshop. And then at the end of that, we usually schedule it for our monthly meetings are on a Tuesday, and he'll come and present that Tuesday, which would fall under Shingo's domain. So again, from the very widest part of the funnel, where maybe you just want to experiential, Sunday, Saturday afternoon, and come away with a tree, and that's it. We see a lot of birthdays, birthday gifts, or a couple who wants to do something, all the way to somebody who is looking for a multi-year experience and to improve their skills and to learn a little bit more about the craft. As we mentioned, from novice to expert, we want to be able to cover all the learning types that people want. Any questions about educational opportunities? About if I want to pay my $95, what would I get? You get a fig, or you get a juniper. Junipers come from Gertens. We love Gertens. Or you would get a fig from Weigert's down in Florida. We get them shipped up from Florida. You would get a training pot from Amazon. You would get bonsai soil, which that's a whole topic for discussion. And then you'll get instructions on how to repot that out of the nursery pot into a bonsai pot. And then you would get guidance, gentle guidance on how you may want to style that tree. So programming, monthly meetings. We also meet monthly at the Wilder Center in St. Paul, Lexington, and University. And we have topics for every meeting. And so Shingo is actually one responsible for that this year. So if you have suggestions, he is the one to go to. We do have a December banquet, which is open to members only because we bring in brasa usually for the past 4 years and feed people. The first Tuesday of every month, typical nonprofit business meeting, announcements, summary of past events, any board actions that we need to talk about, and then a presentation. Presentation is by members, or I mentioned visiting bonsai professionals, or even people in the community that can speak on bonsai related or bonsai adjacent topics. I know last November I got, I don't know if people in town have heard of Revere Auctions, their local auction house, and they at the time were running an Asian art auction. And so we had them come and speak about the history of Asian art in the Twin Cities, and all the way from the early days at MIA and how they acquired their collection to people in the community who were collected these huge jade slabs that made an impression on me. And so basically just trying to get a breadth of programming that has to do with bonsai. Sometimes it's very tactical. Hey, what pest control are we using? Sometimes it's very tactical. What do we do to prepare for the state fair? That's usually the August meeting. And so again, a very varied number of topics. We also have people who are vendors in attendance who can sell bonsai soil, trees, tools, that type of thing. In the Twin Cities, there is not a large retail presence for bonsai supplies. And so this is a great way to be able to acquire some, and we'll talk a little bit more about where you can source some other stuff, but to be able to have some members who actually do this as a sideline, I think is a benefit to our club members as well. Outreach, how we get out into the public, how we support public efforts. We have 2 yearly public exhibitions. In the spring, we do the Mother's Day show at Como, free and open to the public. It's a members only display, but basically if you're a member of MBS and you have a tree that is living, we welcome you to present at Como. It's in the Great Hall, right when you walk into the right. It's a beautiful space, and we really get good feedback from the public there. And then I mentioned the state fair. One interesting thing that not a lot of people know is that the public can exhibit alongside us at the state fair, because that's a requirement imposed upon us by the state fair. And so we have maybe 2 or 3 people every year who don't necessarily want to join for whatever reason, but we welcome them, and the state fair makes that possible. I mentioned the state fair exhibit is actually judged and critiqued, and so that's a great way to get feedback from an individual who sees many bonsais across the U.S. and sees great quality bonsai and is able to give sort of a baseline evaluation of one's tree, like this is what your tree is really doing, and how it could be better, some stuff like that. Twice yearly auctions, and so this is another way we get a lot of people interested. This is free and open to the public. Typically at the Washington County Fairgrounds in Lake Elmo, Stillwater. Anybody can come and buy. It's open to the public. I am one of the 2 people who is more than willing to take your credit card, so I'm always happy to see people through the door. Only members can sell, and so again, that's a little bit of a carrot to join. And we do, was explaining to the guys, is that you'll see a lot of bonsai go for $20, $30. We have some pots, some trees that go for thousands of dollars. We don't have any go probably above $1,500. That's about where we top out at. Bonsais can go for 5 figures, 6 figures. Some of the national treasures in Japan are probably valued at millions of dollars. And so that's about where we're at in Minnesota, the thousands of dollars. We typically hold those in June and mid-October. So if you're available at any one of those dates and you happen to be in the East Metro area, come and by and see what the it's a great way to see what the market supports, because that's, people are paying and they're bidding until it sells. And so that's a great way to see, what it would take to get into the bonsai market. We also do outreach that is targeted giving. And so we support low-income individuals, and we have people that will approach us and say, hey, I'm a limited income. Are there provisions? And we'll work with people on a case-by-case basis. And we have a number of people who, will ask them to give us some sort of documentation, but we're happy to provide them with free or reduced membership. One thing new that we're also providing assistance past couple of years for special education classes. And we donate money so that they can buy trees and tools, and I believe help them with their emotional learning, regulating their emotions to be able to do stuff. And, tree is pretty easy. It doesn't ask too terribly much of you other than to keep it alive. And so I think that's going to be a presentation maybe this spring at how we're doing there. And so again, a number of ways we reach out. Some are more public than others, but we do targeted assisted giving to those groups and individuals that need it. Any questions on sort of the overview of the offerings or the year of a year in the life of a member? You're good? Okay. So this is a brief primer on the practice of bonsai. Again, we're going to keep this very high level. We could talk for, both Shingo and I are talkers. We could talk for days, weeks, hours, however long, but I'm just going to hit the highlights. Going to give you an overview straight from Wikipedia. These are the first two paragraphs from Wikipedia. And it began in Asia, right? It's Chinese, Asian, and we are new to the game in the United States. We've not been doing it for as many centuries, years, centuries, decades as they have. There are very, it is an art that has a very specific aesthetic, has very specific rules. Some people choose to adhere by those rules. Some people like, hey, it's my tree, I can do whatever I want, and it shows. It will show. I'm not going to read all this to you. Again, I reference from Wikipedia, but the 4 things that I underline: growing, shaping, trees, and containers. We'll talk about them in a little bit more detail in the slides in the next few minutes here. But basically, a tree in a shallow pot, if you can think of it as that. Oops. There we go. Okay. Bonsai trees. Any tree may be a bonsai. And that is a common miss. Oh, you bought a bonsai tree. Well, you buy a tree, and then through technique, it becomes a bonsai tree. And so any tree from anywhere could be a bonsai tree. As with anything in life, some trees are more suited than others. Some trees are more suited in this particular climate. Some trees do better at the microclimate at my house versus Shingo's house versus wherever, right? But the thing is that you can pick up a tree and give enough time, effort, you can make it into a bonsai tree, okay? The other thing is that we talked about what trees could become bonsai. Shingo has a tree that, a tropical tree.
Ficus.
Right, a ficus, a fig, right? They are not native to this area. In our business, they are tropical. And so a tropical tree is treated differently from a native tree. And the example I give here is a tamarack or larch, right? Is that we have no shortage of bogs a little bit north of here. And our members will often go out yearly like, hey, who's going up north this year? And we'll collect from the bogs examples of tamarack or larches, okay? Those make great bonsai trees. They're native. And I put the fun fact there is that I didn't know this when I started, is the large example of a conifer that actually loses its needles every year. And so when people who are not advised of such beforehand are like, hey, my larch just died. It turned bright yellow and all the needles fell off. I'm like, well, that's what larches, tamaracks do. So it depends on what you're interested in. You know, you may specialize in figs. You may want to do all native. You may want to do just pines. You may want to do hardwoods. You may want to do bougainvilleas. You may want to do whatever. Any tree can be a bonsai. It's where your interests lie. Do you want something that needs to be in a relatively mild, humid environment for most of the year? Or do you want to get something like a conifer or a native hardwood that needs to be put in a cold frame every year, right? Is that the trees that natively and naturally go to sleep over the winter, you've got to do the same as a bonsai. And so we have what are called cold frames that we keep, just above freezing, 35, 38, something like that. And that's where a lot of those trees reside over the winter, because that's what they naturally expect to do. They will not be healthy trees if they don't go dormant during the winter. Whereas a fig tree, doesn't go dormant. It is from, it'd be happy being in the Florida heat and having that Gulf Coast moisture. And so depending on what tree you pick, depends on its yearly cycle of what you have to do to it, how you have to care for it when it's not outside during the summer. And so, again, a lot of people like, oh, I'm going to buy a special bonsai tree. I'm going to go to, I believe Como Gift Shop has them for sale from time to time. And it's not, you're not buying a bonsai tree, you're buying a tree that you turn into a bonsai. And so that's the point I want to make there. Questions? We're good? Okay. Bonsai containers. We talked about that. Containers are pots in our parlance, and they can be ceramic. That's what most people think of when they think of a bonsai pot, a ceramic pot. Very popular, probably 90% of bonsais ends up in a ceramic pot. Metal. We've seen people do, I think I've seen people for sale at the auction, like selling disc brakes, old disc brakes that they'll turn into a bonsai pot, something like that. Wood. Wood is often used when you want to encourage growth. It's very porous. It lets in a lot of air for air exchange. Wood is also used when you do collecting of very large trees out in the Rocky Mountains. And that is called yamadori. When you're collecting like above 8,000 or 10,000 feet like that, and you extract these big, huge conifers, and you want to preserve their root structure, but no way are you going to find a pot that's big enough to contain sort of these gangly and wild roots. And so you will actually build your bonsai container to the tree that you collect. And you may store it in there indefinitely. You may have it in there for a couple of years, but wood is an often used material for a bonsai container, which most people don't think of. And then finally, plastic. For our introductory classes, we buy a ton of plastic training pots off of Amazon, and that's a good starter pot. They're very cheap. They're not necessarily great long-term because they don't allow for as much air exchange as a wooden container or a ceramic stone container, but they're great to get started. Materials and sizes are chosen according to desired effect they'll have in the tree. And that's again, a reoccurring theme is that what do you want to do with that tree and what lever do you want to pull when we're talking about pots or containers. I chose this tree because this is a container. Right? This is considered a container. This is a, I don't know if that's natural stone or a piece of pottery that was made that way, but you often see bonsai trees like this, where it's nothing more than, again, stone in some shape, form, or fashion with just a little bit of soil on top of it, and that's how the tree grows, right? And so again, this is considered a bonsai container. Not typical pot, but this is, a lot of people maybe want to specialize in that. And so people can and do, make trees that fit into those types of containers. Bonsai growing. A bonsai tree is always in development or refinement. And so what affects that growth and what affects that refinement? My trees that I have are always going to be in development. I'm never going to be done with them. I don't know if I ever want to be done with them. But development is that your tree is not to the point where you want it, whether it's size, whether it's shape, whether it's age, what have you. Refinement is when you get to the point where your tree is quote unquote done and you don't want it any bigger. You've gotten in the shape it's in. It's been 10, 15, 20 years that you've been working on this tree and you're like, I finally have gotten done what I want to get done. And now it's going to be, quote, in refinement. There are different considerations for keeping a tree in the same size, same shape, same form versus one that you actually want growth. And so these are all the levers that we have to be able to affect that growth. Do we want to slow down that growth? In refinement, you don't want much growth. You want as little growth as possible. In development, you want growth. You want the trunk thicker. You want this branch to do this. You want this branch to go there. You want this leaf pattern. You want this ramification. And so every one of these bullet points, basically in bonsai, we're about fine grain control over the growing of the tree. And so we have these levers that we pull. How much sun does it get? Am I under shade cloth? My personal situation at home is that I get full sunlight till noon, and then I get full shade in the afternoon. That's just where my trees happen to live at my house. Some people don't have that option. They're like, hey, I need to put it on the south balcony of my apartment, or I have an eastern exposure, that type of thing. And so sun, water, how often you water. I mentioned earlier is that if you have good bonsai soil, which actually it's not dirt, it's a bonsai growing medium, is that if it's healthy and you water, you want all the water to run through it, right? It'll grab it'll grab what it needs. But if you have healthy soil, you want to see most of that water right through your pot. Air, your choice of pots. Is it a glazed pot? Is it an unglazed pot? Unglazed pots are going to allow for more air exchange, right? How many holes do you have at the bottom of your pot? And so again, it's a deep topic, it's a multi-year topic, but just think about we want in bonsai to be able to manipulate these to get the fine grain control to control the growth of the tree to the plus or to the minus. Fertilizer, that's a very sensitive and touchy subject. Do you do the granules? Do you do liquid? How often do you do them? What dosage? 5-5-5, 10-10-10. Do you want to do organic? Do you want to do fish meal? Whatever, right? Again, it's different for every case. Bonsai soil is that typically you'll see bonsai soil made of three components: pumice, lava, and akadama, which is a calcined refined clay from Japan. And each one of those, and what percentage of them that you mix them up, you can buy pre-mixed or you can mix your own. Each one of those constituent components affects the growth of the tree. The lava and the pumice are very porous, so they hold on to air, right? What size? We have people, I do it at home, I have different size sieves where I sieve out my soil, because bigger tree, you want bigger particles that'll affect the growth. The akadama is interesting, and it's the most expensive, is that it's a clay that will wet and then give that water back over the course of hours in the summertime or days in the wintertime. And so its job is to take on water and then slowly release it, creating this microclimate in that pot, right? And so again, it's all about fine grain control. We talked a little bit about pots, how pots can affect. One thing you'll often see that people outside of bonsai won't necessarily know is that for display, if you're entering your tree into a competition or getting judged, prior to that event, a week before, a couple days before, they will unpot and pot into a much smaller pot, because historically that's an aesthetic that you want this big tree supported by the smallest pot possible. That's not great for the tree necessarily, but for display and judging, that's considered an aesthetic that is desirable. Once the competition is over, people will go back home, repot it into the pot it stays in, 9-10 months of the year. And so again, it's all these different levers that we're able to adjust. Pruning, cutting, pinching, right, is that be able to affect where the tree grows, how the tree goes, where your apex is. Do I want this branch to go over here. One thing I didn't put on here is grafting. That's a super important point or a part of bonsai. And so finally, pest control. We ask a lot of the trees. If you have a tree in refinement, I've heard tell that a perfectly refined tree is always one pretty close to death. You're keeping it alive. You're not letting it grow, which all organic beings want to do. And so when we stress the trees, and we are stressing the trees, this is an art form that stresses the trees, that we are more susceptible to pests, to funguses, to miticides. A lot of times I mentioned the cold frame in the winter. We have to have exhaust fans. We have to have air circulation in that 30, 35 degree thing, or we'll get fungus, right? And so we have to balance the humidity that the tree needs with too much. We get pest. And so again, this is all things that you have to consider over the course of a year to get your tree to grow. Any questions that make sense? We're good? No. Shaping. People coming in think when they take our half-day course, our half-day workshop, oh, I'm going to style my bonsai. That's what I'm here for. Well, that's half the equation, is that you need a healthy tree to be able to do the styling you want. And it's a very symbiotic relationship between, I want to style it this way. Well, you're taking too much off. You're not going to, that's not enough chlorophyll for the tree to grow so that you'll have the branch to do what you want, right? And so bonsai shaping is what is in people's minds, like what bonsai is all about. But the actual growing and health of the tree is, I think, probably as important, but people aren't interested in necessarily learning about that, and because that's a much longer topic. And the last slide will show, I just took this off the internet. I talked about a very historic background for the art, and these are typical shapes that you'll see, and Shingo would know the Japanese names for all these, but people say, oh, I've got a literati tree I want to work on this year, or I've got a root over rock, or stuff where I'm not growing my trees in a pot, I'm growing them on a rock. And so those are very dramatic. Down the second, bottom row, second from the left, the forest. Those are very popular, where you have a number of trees of the same species. You get a big pot and you plant an odd number of trees, always odd number, but you'll plant maybe 5. You'll have a tamarack forest. You go up collecting, or you'll have a redwood species of forest. It's very interesting to see redwoods, which we think of typically as the monsters of the continent. You get a redwood forest where the trees will all be that foot tall, that type of thing, and those are very, very beautiful, very striking. And so, if you follow history, if you follow convention, you'll probably end up with one of these shapes, just because that's what bonsaiists do. I will say that everybody who comes to our introductory workshop and chooses a juniper, oh, I'm going to do a cascade. I'm going to do a cascade. Everybody wants that big swoop, right? I'm like, well, is that what the tree is telling you to do, right? Are you going to hurt the tree to an extent that it's not going to be healthy and trying to turn it into a cascade? Well, maybe, maybe not. And then we'll look at, oh, maybe you could look at doing something else. But typically, the end game, the end aesthetic of a bonsai tree is one of these forms. Again, you don't have to do that, but historically, over many years, decades, and centuries, these are sort of where people end up in doing this type of work. Okay, getting started. This is my last slide before I'll turn it over to Shingo. You can get into the hobby for a couple $100, maybe under 100. First thing, you'll need a trees online. With anything else, you can actually buy bonsai seedlings on Amazon, right? You can go out and collect them. If you have trees in your yard, you can collect those. Those can become bonsai. If you can collect them in your neighbor's yard, hey, my neighbor is getting rid of a big bush in his yard. He's redoing his landscaping. Ask if you could take his tree off of him. He doesn't have to pay then the lawn service to take it away. We have had a lot of people do that. I have had great success at year-end clearance sales at garden centers. I've gotten a couple of great lilacs. Lilacs make great bonsai. They look great. They smell great. For $15. When garden centers are shutting down for the end of the year, and so just keep your eye out. Just like anything, it pays to pay attention. Pots online, Amazon, MBS auction. One of the preeminent potters in the United States is down in Red Wing, Sarah Rayner. She is known across the U.S. For the quality and breadth and depth of her pots, and so we're lucky to have her. She's getting a little old now and doesn't do as much. She'll do maybe 1 or 2 events a year, but she's still a great resource. Soil, again, online, Amazon. MBS, as a member benefit, does a yearly bulk buy where we'll bring in pallets of the 3 different constituents and offer them pretty much at cost, a little bit above to cover our cost. But that's a great way to buy. And tools, cutter sets, wired. We haven't even talked about wiring trees. I imagine Shingo has done some wiring on his trees. Online, Amazon, yearly auctions. So again, if you really want to get into this, it's $100. If you want to dip your toes in the water, maybe $200, depending on what type of trees you do. But it's not a hugely expensive hobby to get into. As with many hobbies, it can grow into an expensive hobby depending on your taste and your interest. But I would say, again, $100, $200, you'll be able to see what it's all about. That is my last slide. I'll save that for the end. But any questions on sort of overview of the organization, bonsai as a pastime, bonsai as an art? I would like at least one question from one of you.
Well, let's have train holes. It's not just one big like saucer without it.
Right. So what we'll have is 2 different types of holes. It'll have holes for the wires, and it'll have holes for drainage. Wiring is important because we want a bonsai, basically the root system. We want the really fine roots. We want a mat of fine roots. Those are the feeder roots, right? And so what we do, especially in the juniper ones, is that we get rid of the taproot. We do not want the taproot. In the juniper ones, the figs not so much, but we'll work with the attendee to take off that taproot. And what we're doing is we're taking away the tree's anchoring, right? Its ability to anchor itself. We're taking away those big roots. And so what we take away, we have to give back, and we anchor through the wiring. We wire the tree into the pot. And so it has very small holes, maybe 6, something along the sides. And so we'll make a saddle of wire, which will anchor that in, protect it from wind, right? A lot of shaking is not good for the trees necessarily. So it has holes for wiring, and then it has holes for drainage, which are maybe about the size of the quarter, which we will typically get some plastic mesh and wire mesh in so the water won't, so the soil won't rush out with the water. So yeah, the drainage and the holes in the pot serve a couple different purposes, and they're very important for the health of the tree as well. Yes?
What factors make one tree $1,000 more expensive?
Size and age.
Could you repeat it for those on?
Sure. The question is what affects the price of a tree? And I didn't put any like national treasures of Japan in this particular thing, but I mean, you'll have trees that will have to be moved by forklift, versus, this size. And, some of the national treasure trees in Japan, 400 years old, stuff like that. And so basically it's size, age, and if there's a lot of dramatic movement to it. A lot of the things that you'll see at that age are the conifers, and they have a lot of deadwood. And that's a whole different topic. Deadwood is bleached to give a contrast to the living tissue versus the dead tissue. But typically it's age and size. I'm sorry, and you had a question.
Like in the peak of our summer.
Yep.
I've always wondered how frequently do you water? Do you have to water a bonsai? And do you end up having to miss the foliage too?
In the height of summer, you're looking, I would say, at least daily. And sometimes you would probably need to check late in the day if it's a particularly hot and windy day, especially wind, will dry out the soil. And the nice thing about the akadama, the clay that I mentioned, is that it's a great visual indicator, because when it's dry, it's light tan, and when it's wet, it's darker brown. And then when you see it go back to that light tan, like, oh, it's dried out. And so that's a great way just to kind of do a spot check. But yeah, in the summer, it can be daily. It can be sometimes multiple times per day. Whether you want to miss the foliage, that's open for debate. Some people say, no, all it needs is soil. Some people like, yeah, I missed. Some people say, well, if you miss the foliage, that increased the chance of pests. But then, the best source of water is just rainwater. So when it rains, the foliage is going to get wet, right? And so again, there's no shortage of opinions on ways to do things. But yeah, in the summer, I would say you want to check your trees at least daily. Yeah.
So it sounds like, do you get like bonsai sitters? Like if you want to go on a weekend trip or whatever?
We often tell people is like, it's not too far of a stretch that you got to consider these like pets.
Yeah.
You have to arrange for care while you're gone. And whether that's a neighbor, whether that's your collection is maybe small enough that you can transport them, that's probably not desirable. But you absolutely have to keep that in mind when you're making plans to be away from your trees. Your trees, depending on time of the year, like if you go away, if I go away right now for a weekend, I can leave my trees no problem. I'll water them before I go, and they'll be wet when I get back. But if you're, again, in the height of summer and you're going to go a week's vacation or, wherever, is that you need to have thought of how my tree is going to get cared for while I'm gone. Absolutely. That's a great question. I will now turn it over to Shingo. He has been generous enough to actually bring a display and a live tree. Shingo's been a member of MBS for
a long time now.
Yeah.
2014 officially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've not left him as much time as I thought I was going to leave him.
It's okay.
But Shingo, take it away.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it, Steve. Can we see the display? All right, so my name is Shingo. I'm originally from South Dakota, but my background make this a little bit more sense. I spent my formative years in Japan, as Steve mentioned. My mom is a College of Art professor, and so I'm a Western trained artist who happened to be in Japan. So this was kind of an easy leap for me to make once I found out about bonsai. Ironically, I did not find out about it in Japan. I found out about it at the state fair, actually, is where I first found these guys. I'm like, where have you guys been all my life? And I've been a fan of them ever since. And as Steve mentioned, each aspect of the bonsai art can be a rabbit hole in and of itself, and a topic for argument in our club meetings as well. It's really actually kind of fun to see what people are using for soil and water and pots and what they're doing differently from others, because it'll give others more ideas on what to do. What I've brought for you today is a ficus. It's a fig. There's tons and tons of varieties of these out here, but it is a tree that you can commonly find at Home Depot and Menards and things like that. Perhaps you've seen them. It is actually kind of where I found mine. So this is a cutting, actually. This was a cutting I took from another tree that I bought at IKEA the first year it was open. Probably cost me less than $10. That tree is still alive. It has given me many other trees, because this tropical species actually takes the cuttings really, really easily. You can chop a branch off of this, stick it in some soil, and if you're lucky, and with a little bit of coaxing, maybe some rooting hormone attached with that, you will get a new tree out of that. Now, do we grow these things from seed? Yes. Do we grow them from cuttings? Yes. But they are a slow growing thing, and to get to this stage, this takes about 10, 15 years. From a cutting. And so, if you're starting a tree from seed, it's something you want to take into consideration, how old you might be, and if you're going to live long enough to see it become what it becomes. Because these things, if we're doing our job right, they will last essentially forever. In Japan, you can kind of see that. One of the answers to your question, actually, about what makes a tree valuable might be its legacy. Who was the owner? Where was that tree collected? And because it will be a collected tree that actually is probably going to be your best tree from the wild. For whatever reason, Mother Nature does the sculpting the best. And then we will refine that. Actually, by refining it, meaning we will take that out of nature, then put it into a container that will slow down the growth and allow us to actually bring out the best aspects of that species, whether it's a conifer or a deciduous. So we love working with all kinds of different trees because they bring out different aspects. So a conifer would not have fall colors unless it's a tamarack. It will give you some gold there, but then also in the spring, that's its best time where the buds on that tamarack are coming back and really just shows off what that thing can look like in the springtime. And then as summer goes on, it starts getting a little shaggy. But like a ginkgo or a maple, right? They will turn color in the fall, in the pots even. A lot of people are kind of surprised about that, but they'll do everything in the pot that they'll do in nature. And that can be also astonishing. They might not be much to look at until the fall, and then they show off their best aspect. But ginkgos are one of my favorites for that. But what I've done here is a typical bonsai display. Very, very typical. Where this display comes from is actually coming out of Japanese households. If you were to go over there and go into a random person's house, they will have an alcove in their living room. And this is just a historical talking piece part of the house that when they entertain guests, they will bring in a bit of nature into that area. And it'd be like, maybe a friend comes over and you're sitting down in the living room and then you have this sitting next to you, and it gives you something to talk about. It might be bringing in a bit of the season, right? This tradition actually comes out of the tea ceremony tradition, and one of the things that they do to that is they, with the tea ceremony, is they will talk about the season you're doing it in. They will typically have a scroll. I've got a couple of examples here of self-made ones that I've produced, but they'll have a scroll that might represent the season you're in. If it's spring, there might be some flowers there. If it's winter, you might just have bare branches or some snow scenes and things like that. We will use that with this display to kind of help tell set the stage for the bonsai, to tell a little bit of the story on where this tree might be found, it is an art form that you're miniaturizing nature. So if you can give a little bit of the background, that can be helpful. The accent does the same thing. So this accent piece, it's also called kusamono. That term means grass thing. Grassy thing is literally kusa is grass, mono is thing, it's just to kind of again help set the stage and it juxtapose the tree there and give you an asymmetrical triangle. This is actually a really, really important feature in Japanese art in particular. You see it in ikebana, flower arrangement. You see it in their versions of modern sculpture actually all the time, and in Japanese gardens galore. You will see that at Como if you head out there to their Japanese garden, which is a master-produced garden with a sister city of Nagasaki, actually, one of the first in the country. So you'll see those asymmetrical triangles. They don't like, nature doesn't like right angles, right? And so you don't see a lot of them in nature. And so that asymmetrical triangle really helps give that asymmetry to the display. So that alcove that I was mentioning in people's houses is this area that's a bit set back. It allows for a hanging scroll or a stone or a little accent plant or a bonsai. I've seen other things too. I've seen deer antlers actually being used in that display too. But it's just a kind of a spot to put something cool that you have. You'll see this in hotels and all over the place. And so we're basically emulating that space and it confines that space. So this is kind of the frame that we're working with, and the painting would be inside there. So you will see this type of setup at our Como show all over the place. You will see this at master shows here and in Japan and Europe and what have you as well. But this is something that's totally doable, and you can find these trees, like Steve said, from anywhere. You can start with your backyard if you've got that. You got some trees growing out there, there's weeds. Put them in a pot, see what you can do with them. If it dies, then you know, you're probably not missing out on a whole lot, but it can be very educational on how that tree actually grows, because you're really watching it, you're taking it out of its context and seeing how it responds to certain actions that you do. A couple other things about this. See, Steve mentioned that we eliminate the taproot. One of the reasons why we do that is that sends the energy down. It does anchor the tree into the ground, which we are not doing in this case. But it also, if you remove that taproot, it actually flares out the bottom of this tree. And one of the things that we look for when we're seeking what's going to make a good bonsai tree, it's the base of the tree. There's a joke in the Bonsai Society, we like big buttress, and it cannot lie. That buttress that you see there, that basically is the foundation of that bonsai tree. Everything else will follow from that. So if we have a nice bell-bottom look to the bottom of that tree, that's a really, really good start. So if you're looking at a nursery tree, you know, and it's in a deep container, oftentimes you won't be able to see the base of this. You might just see the top, what we call a pencil sticking out of the soil. Not a whole lot of interest there. But if you peel away the top bit of that soil, you might get some interesting aspects that appear there. And that can be what triggers you to buying that tree and then sculpting the rest. From there, we will use a combination of techniques to keep the tree small and slow down that growth so that we can control it to a degree. It's a bit of a give and take where we're putting some pressure on the tree, watching that tree respond to that pressure, and then doing that again. And then together we kind of create this this sculpture. And it is a living sculpture. The aspects that make it a bonsai and miniaturized in its miniaturized form, it's hard to make small trees look old, right, and interesting. One of the ways we do that is young trees typically grow like this. They grow like my hair. They just grow straight up and out. And then as time goes on, those branches will start to stag with gravity and just the weight of the branches, and they'll start creating some space. So what I've done here, now this tree is about 10 to 15 years old. I've kind of forgotten, to be honest with you, but in its natural mind, it would be way huge. These trees can get massive. They can eat cities, but we're keeping this small by keeping it in a container. And then I trim it every once in a while. This actually is a pretty fast grower compared to other trees. And then I will use wire to bring these branches down. So I'm going to be bringing those branches down, styling them, giving a little bit of movement in there as well. And that allows for, first of all, the age of the tree to kind of come out. It kind of gives you a sense of old to that tree. But also, too, there's some health reasons on why we do that as well. If you put the branches down, it does allow for some space in between the branches, and you can get more air and light to the interior of the tree, which is good for its health. Steve did mention too that we are kind of keeping these things on the cusp of death. But again, if we are balancing things correctly, this will maximize its health in that environment, and again, it will outlive other trees of its kind in the nature. And so we will bring those branches down, we will style them, and then we'll allow what we call foliage pads to develop on most of the trees. That's kind of how they work, where you have almost like little clouds of foliage that will appear, and you create balance that way. And so this is a pretty good example of how you would do that. This is would be an example of the informal upright that you saw on the previous slide there, and is a good one to use. I actually have, so the same species, same tree, actually, because they're all cuttings of each other. I have many different forms. I have a literati that's just like very avant-garde, you know, squiggly line piece almost, and it looks really cool. I also have the cascade, so I've trained the branches to go down below the base of the pot. So it'll always need to be on a stand, because it can never actually touch the table. It'll bend the branches back up. And so you can really kind of do a lot with a fig that you can't necessarily do with all the trees, but certain trees lend themselves to certain looks. So as you were seeing in the slides here, you saw probably some pines. There was actually Hawaiian umbrella tree that was on there. I forget what they call it, Schiffelia or something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of names, and I'm bad with names. But that one was actually donated by somebody in Forest Lake that actually contacted me. We have a special needs character in the club who's very, very good with that species of tree, and she wanted it to go to a good home, but wasn't able to care for it herself. But she was very adamant that I knew that it was 40 years old, and I said I had the perfect person for it, and so that tree is really interesting just from the age, but it's really interesting. You can get aerial roots that'll actually grow down from the branches to the soil, which is really kind of cool. And this tree is actually capable of doing that too. They'll actually send it in nature. You'll see it a lot. Angkor Wat, if you've ever seen pictures of that temple structure in Cambodia, you will see that this same species of tree eating that temple complex, and you'll see that they'll send down roots to the base there because it's that humid there, and they only do that in humidity. Running out of time.
At the end of the hour here.
Great.
If anyone would like to stick around, and if more importantly, Shingo and Steve, you'd like to stick around, right, and continue and take questions, that's great. I think the DNR is not kicking us out anytime soon. I just want to give a quick plug for next month. We have a double feature for the MNSTAC Forum. It's going to be an update from the DNR and then another piece with Mark Cruz about tapping maple trees. So with that, I will cease interrupting.
Any questions so far? Any questions about what you see up here and what it means? And
we do have one of our committee folks online.
Yes.
And Megan's question is, this is a more general question, but this is clearly an art form and a hobby you would want to put time and effort into. What time would you want to set aside for getting started for caring for a bonsai?
That's a terrific question. I would say, and piggybacking on what Steve said about watering, that could be a daily event. That's usually what the case is. I usually describe it to the crowds as it's about as much work as a dog. They're very similar. They bark, but these guys are quieter. Yeah, you'll want to water them basically every day. That's going to be the rule of thumb to follow, but you can kind of get away with maybe 2 or 3 days in between. So if you are leaving town, one of the aspects of the club is you get to know others that know how to water these things, and you can tap them for help. For example, my wife is from Japan, and so we go back from time to time, and that usually means I'm gone for about a month. And I have a very generous buddy of mine in the club that we kind of piggyback off each other there, and he will water my trees. He'll come over, he has access to my house, he knows exactly what to do, and I return the favor to him whenever I can, absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of the club, actually, is you have people that will help you. There's a lot of aspects to this. Coming out of my original background was just painting. If you had the paints, the brushes, the canvas, you're more or less good to go. But there's so much to this: the soil, the pots, the stands, the scrolls, all the little things there that go into that. Everybody kind of takes on a role, and they find an aspect of this art that they actually kind of like.
It also depends too. On the size of your collection. Mm-hmm. Right. Shingo, how many trees would you say you have?
Oh, probably easily a couple hundred. Yeah.
I have a couple dozen. And so my investment per week is going to be less than Shingo's, just because, physically being able to water all those trees is going to take less time for me. I mean, we have some people who multiple hundreds of trees and dedicated greenhouse space, that type of thing. And Absolutely. So it all depends, you don't have to go full bore right away. Is that if you want to start out with one tree, you're probably going to kill it. So I would start out with at least 2 trees. And if you have a handful of trees, 2 or 3, 4, one that allows you to work on trees, because once you're done with a tree, you may not touch it for another year. And so if you have multiple trees, that increases your odds for survivability, but it also gives you a chance to refine your skills and work on that. Work on multiple trees, because like we've mentioned, is that we have a saying is that you're either going to work on the soil repotting it in a year, or you work on a pruning it a year. You're not necessarily going to do both in the same year. You're going to work above ground or below ground, sort of a rule of thumb. But it all depends on how many trees you have. And with a couple dozen trees in the winter, for me, an hour a week, a couple hours a week, just to water and make sure that they're getting enough light, pick up any leaves that may have, dropped. But in the summer, basically we have a rule of thumb. Shingo's fig, if it's a tropical, trees are not going to go outside in Minnesota until it's reliably 50 degrees Fahrenheit overnight, right? And so sometimes that's May, right? And sometimes that ends in September, early October. That's our busy season. And with respect to the time, your time's going to go way up because the weather's going to dictate you spend more time. Pests are going to dictate you spend more time on it. So it depends on time of year and how many trees you may actually want to take care of.
And I can also just bring us back to, a fundamental aspect of that. If you were looking to get started, and let's just say you were lucky enough to have a backyard with some weed trees growing in the back there, spring would be the best time to grab them as their roots are just coming together and that you haven't really seen a whole lot of growth yet. You can stick them into a pot and then watch them develop over the summer and then into the fall. We also say the fall is not a bad time to do collecting or repotting stuff there as well. That's kind of when you can mess with the roots relatively safely. But then our winters are very severe here, and that might be easier done in California or in Florida, but it's a little tricky here. So we tend to prefer that people work on their trees in the spring. One of the other things that I wanted to address really quickly, because it's a really common misconception, is that these do not necessarily live inside. These tropical trees can, but they're best if they can be exposed to the sun. So they'll tolerate my back bedroom that I've converted into a greenhouse for them. I've got about 30 tropicals or so, and the rest are all native species that are outside or in my cold frame. But for these trees, I actually usually at the shows, I'll hear from the public saying, oh, I was gifted a tree and it died. Well, where was it at? On my kitchen table. That's why. They need to be exposed to the light. So that's a good rule of thumb, that if you do get a tree, get it outside as soon as you can safely do so. So in Minnesota, it's a little tricky, but if it's a native species, that could happen earlier. Usually around March or April, you'll usually get decent enough weather where your trees can come outside, and we'll ease them out there. We don't just shove them out there because they can get sunburned, actually. And you'll see bleaching on the leaves and on the needles from lack of light over the winter, and then they'll be stunned a little bit. So if you can get them a little bit of shade in the early spring, they will sail off into the summer and they'll look terrific thereafter. But really, really common misconception there is that these things grow on inside. What happens in Japan, though, I might say, is that they grow outside, but when company comes over, they come inside for that duration, and you show it off to the people, just like I'm doing right now. Then once we're done here, this is going to go back home onto its health placement area, whatever that may be, whether it's inside under lights or outside in the cold frame, and then or if it's growing season like summer months, then it'll just go back out on the bench. That's where it stays for health. But oh yes, sure.
So Steve mentioned that there's like the pot that it lives in and then the display pot.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that's a display pot. Is that right?
It is actually, but it's been living in that for a few years now. And so it can survive in there, but he's not wrong though. Like we will weasel a tree into a smaller pot for a show, because we really want to put on the best display possible. We really want to almost stun people with what they're seeing, and having a very, very minimalist pot, very, very thin. I mean, these could be an inch or less in depth, but they don't need a whole lot of depth into that container. These roots are actually very small. We want fine roots, and so they're not having to go far to look for nutrients, because we're giving it to them. All the water, all the fertilizer and things like that are being handed over to it, so it doesn't need to send out these large roots and look for that itself. We can give it to it, and so it can maintain health in that. But if we were, let's say, if it was a much bigger tree and required more resources, we get it into that pot for the show. We bring it back home, and it might even just be a box. It's very common because they're very durable and they break down, but they're also very porous and they can do some good things for underneath in the root area there. And so we'll keep it there so it can maintain health. And because really one of the key aspects of health inside the pot is actually air exchange with the surface. So again, if you have a bigger tree, bigger soil components, more oxygen in there. Because what actually happens in there is bacteria that's growing in there, a lot of micronutrients that those things feed off of, and then the tree is feeding off of the waste product of that. And so there you have a biome might be a little bit of a strong term, but essentially that's what's going on inside there. And so if you can create a better atmosphere for that while it's not being shown, great. And we also have a saying too that we have lots of sayings in this club. We do have lots of them because it's the best way to teach people and have them remember it. But you can, let's see, you can, I don't know if we want to open up that can of worms yet, but yeah, the essentials are that you can maximize the health of the tree by making sure you have an appropriate size pots. But for the show, you can really do anything you'd like there, and they don't always need pots. You can actually grow these things on slabs. Stone slabs I have collected from around the area here because the limestone that we have is almost perfect for that, and we'll secure a tree to that, and it'll just stay there forever almost. And yeah.
Okay, and then just maybe to close, you looking for volunteers with the organization, and what does that look like?
Oftentimes we'll say that we'd like to do more in the club, but we're volunteer constrained. And so we have sign-up sheets for various things, like both of our Mother's Day display, exhibition, state fair. We always have to have volunteers because people want to touch the trees. We don't want people to touch the trees. That's not good for the trees. And so we always have somebody there. Sometimes we're behind, barricades, the straps. We also have volunteers for our public classes, like people who are circulating Shingo. I love volunteer for the beginning class because people are so enthusiastic. We have volunteers who, one thing Shingo didn't mention explicitly, but we also offer like a rehoming service. Like if a member is ill or sick, people will often want to hold on to the trees as a memory of those people and not necessarily know how to care for the trees. So we have volunteers that will rehome trees. We have no shortage of opportunities to volunteer. And if you want to, explore that, get in touch via our website. Our administrator is great. You can, email, or I think there's a web form you can contact, but it's a great way to volunteer. And we tell people, even if you're in year 2 of your journey, you're going to know people who have never done this, and you can offer them the benefit of at least a year's worth of experience. And so we have people who took the class the beginning class a year ago, who will come back and volunteer to help people be able to wire their trees into pots, or style them or something like that. And so we, as like this first slide, we're a volunteer run organization. We always could find a spot for volunteers.
We all have day jobs, but we all kind of take a turn and help out. And the saying I was forgetting about is that these things can go in really any direction, though. You can really, the more people we have involved, the more directions they go in, and the community support is imperative to that. And then, even with just a year's worth of knowledge, you have way more than the general public, and you can really impress them actually with your rudimentary knowledge of how these things work, because most people have never seen these things before, never heard of this before, and they can be stunned. Actually, we have people regularly that will. I had 2 people do this last Mother's Day actually at Como, where they would walk in and they would go, "This is all fake," and walk out. And absolutely not every aspect of this is actually very, very real. It's kind of cool that we can trick people like that.
Well, fantastic. We'll put a link to the Minnesota Bonsai Society website in the chat for Megan, but then again, when we post the video. And everyone, please give a hand for Steve and Shingo.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.